Hey guys, it's Matthew, and in today's video I'm going to show you the exact system that I say used to because I'm retired from setting, book me 52 sales calls per month for fitness coaching. Yes, you heard that right, 52 sales calls per month for fitness coaching. Okay, now a lot of people typically on average book between 1 to 3 sales calls a week, which is okay, but it could be a lot better, right? Now, the reason that people typically don't book calls is because of what I am about to go through with you today. Okay, now I'm also going to go through the common downfalls of people who want to book sales calls, because a lot of people get booking sales calls wrong, right? They feel like they need the 3 things that hold them back the most, which is scripts, setters, and VAs. Okay, I have seen people who book 2 calls a month or 2 calls a week hire a setter. Because you can't do it yourself, you hand it off to someone else, right? But if you can't book calls in your own account, how the hell do you expect someone else to book calls in yours? And also, you don't need a commission-only setter or paid by the hour or a salaried setter if you're booking 2 calls a month. Okay, anyway, regardless. So I'm going to go through the don'ts first, then I'm going to go through the do's, okay? Because I want you to avoid these mistakes and book sales calls, okay? So first off, the don'ts, right? Things that you should not do if you wanted to book anywhere close to 52 sales calls a month. And that is firstly being too generic. Now what do I mean by that? It's being too generic with your messages, right? A lot of people get a script from a business mentor, right? Obviously, I am not a business mentor at all. I'm a sales coach, big difference, right? They get a script from a mentor and it's very generic. It's like, hey, did you follow me for your content, or did you find me on the Explore page, or some shit like that, right? Okay, it's too generic. The messages that they send aren't specific enough to people, right? Now I can go really deep into DM psychology, but I'm not going to, because this video would be 4 hours long, okay? And I've got sales calls to take, whatever. But being generic with people and being generic in the way that you converse with people is not going to book you more sales calls, because people aren't going to be emotionally invested, okay? Now, in order for someone to be emotionally invested, they need to feel heard, seen, and understood, okay? And you are not going to get that from being very generic and sending very, very, very generic messages. Okay, so on the flip side of that, we need to be personal with people. Okay, now I have countless amounts of videos on my channel going through like actual DM strategy and what to say, etc., etc., and how to structure messages, how to structure conversations, how to qualify, etc. But now I'm just going to give you the psychological framework that I use to book calls, because once you have that, sending messages is easy. Okay, too generic, right? Do not do it, right? Second of all, do not be too pushy and do not be too salesy, okay? Now, I have legitimately seen the inside of people's DMs where someone has followed them and then 4 messages later, they're being offered a call, okay? Now, if you try to force a square peg into a round hole, you are going to be left looking like an idiot. And if you try to be too pushy and too salesy in the DMs, then you're going to be left looking like an idiot without any sales calls, okay? So you can be subtly salesy, right? You can be subtly pushy, right? Subtly, right? And I don't mean you force yourself on people, but you can ask questions and structure questions in a way that gets the prospect to feel like they need to change, which then leads to them booking a call with you. Okay, if you want to learn more about that, click the link down below, book a call, and I can show you how to do that. Okay, no problem at all. So we don't want to be too pushy, we don't want to be too salesy. Okay, so we don't want to go straight for the throat, right? Oh, hey, name, are you interested in coaching, as the first message? If you say that in 2025, you are asking to be left behind. Okay, then we've got people being too friendly. Okay, now what you need to remember is that you're not online, you're not on Instagram to make friends and have casual conversations with people, right? I have legitimately seen people be instructed to talk to prospects about the weather, talk to them about their life, talk to them about their holidays in an effort to build rapport. Yeah. People still do that in 2025. Now let me ask you this, right? When you go and see an expert, right? When you go and see someone who's an expert in their field, like your doctor, okay? Does the doctor ask you about your holiday to Lisbon in 2013, right? Probably doesn't, right? Because they don't care, right? Now, they care about you, but they don't care about where you went on holiday, right? And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make with sales calls, I'm just going to move something out of the sun quickly. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make with sales calls is booking sales calls, sorry. They try to be the prospect's best friend because they think that that builds rapport. No, it doesn't, right? You get put in the friend zone, right? And your status gets eroded because you're trying to be too friendly with the prospect, okay? You don't need to be a prospect's friend in order to get them onto a sales call, okay? You need to show expertise, find out their problems, find out their point B, find out their point A, and then offer the solution, which is the sales call, okay? You don't need to be the prospect's best friend, okay? I'll tell you what as well, we're gonna add a bonus tip in here, a bonus point. I'm gonna go through that point in a minute, right? That's another killer, okay? But just to recap, right? You don't want to be too friendly with the prospect. Oh, how is your day going? Blah, blah, blah. Typical crap to build rapport, right? You don't need to do that. The don'ts is you don't have any trust built with a prospect, okay? Now, trust comes from being understood, being seen, being heard, being considered, being thought of. And you cannot book a call without building up trust, because that person, you need to sell them out on each stage, right? First you need to sell them on getting a reply, then you need to sell them on answering your questions, then you need to sell them on booking a call, then you need to sell them on obviously like making the investment, right? And that only happens with trust, okay? Now the way that you build up trust in a conversation isn't by talking to them about the weather and being too friendly, it's by making the prospect feel seen, heard and understood. Okay, which ultimately comes from understanding their pain, understanding their position, and finding out about them. Because once they start to talk about themselves and they start to express themselves on a deeper level to you, they're going to trust you because they're opening up to you. Okay, now last but not least, absolutely do not do this, and that is shit follow-up, and more importantly, sending gifts. Okay, now if you get ignored by someone in the DMs, you are not to follow them up with ridiculous messages like, hey, are you still there? Hey, did my message work for you? Instagram's been playing up. Hey, did you fall over? Hey, have you been abducted by aliens, right? Oh, that is painful to hear, and I've seen that firsthand, right? I've seen people say to people, oh, hey, have you been abducted by aliens because someone ignored your message? Or they've sent them like gifts. Right? I understand why people do it, like I understand why people send those messages, but they are terrible, right? Let's say, for instance, right, if you're watching this, chances are you're a business owner, right? And you're trying to get better at sales. So let's say that you were in a sales conversation with someone, or you were having a conversation with someone. Let's say you were having a conversation with me, right? Whatever. Let's just say, for instance, that you obviously, you spoke to me about obviously like my sales academy, blah, 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 blah. Imagine if I followed up with you with a GIF, right? Imagine if I followed up with you with, hey, have you been abducted by aliens? You would look at me, and this is how I look at people who do it, because I'm projecting onto you right now by saying this is how I view people. I would look at you and think, this guy's an idiot. This guy is not got authority. Because if you have authority and if you have status, you do not need to follow up with people with GIFs, with ridiculous messages, etc., etc. Okay? It all comes down to status perception, authority perception, and how people see you. Because if people, once you compromise on your values, once you compromise on being the authority and send people gifts and follow up with them with, hey, are you still there? Hey, etc., etc., and just badgering them with follow-up that is shit, then people are going to decrease their status perception of you, decrease your authority, and ultimately they're not going to respect you enough to get onto a call with you and to become a client. Okay? If you want to learn how to follow up, that's something that I can go over, right? Not a problem at all. Not in this video though. Don't get too ahead of yourself. But those are the don'ts, right? I would say the worst one that I've seen is being too friendly, right? And following up with gifts and shit, right? Just don't do it, please, right? So the do's, right? So this is what I want you to do. Qualify via pathway, right? I forgot to write the word message on here, so I'm going to do that, okay? Now, what do I mean by a pathway message? Okay, now if we were to imagine a flow chart, right? So let's put the thought of a flow chart into your head, right? So, hey, say for instance someone follows you. Hey, are you following me for the content, or do you have sort of like, what can we say, right? What would I say? Hey, their name. Thanks for the follow. Did you follow me for content? Did you follow me for just general content, or are you looking for help with a specific problem, right? So if someone follows you for the content, right, then that puts them into one category, which is nurture over time, right? If someone's following you for help with a specific problem, then that qualifies them because it means that they're actively looking for help, because they're actively looking for ways to solve problems, okay? So that's what I mean when I say qualify via a pathway message. And basically what we want to just imagine is we're just funneling people down into different parts of conversations, right? So it's like a flow chart, right? So they either reply with this message and then they cut themselves off, or they reply with this message and then they enter a flow chart of different messages and different questions at different stages, which ultimately then lead to booking a call. Okay, so that's what I mean by a qualify via pathway message. Okay, then I've put assumptions to dig into pain, right? The best way to dig into pain is to assume that someone else is already there and then they would agree with you, right? So like, let's say for instance, if someone says that they've been trying to lose weight for 6 months and they've not got anywhere, right? You can then say to them, oh, I'm guessing that's left you feeling all kinds of frustrated, right? Obviously you don't say it like that because you're typing it, but what you're doing is you're assuming their feelings, right? You're putting an emotional label on them to dig into their pain, because if they don't tell you that they're frustrated, you're never going to dig into the feelings of frustration that they give you. However, if you assume that they are frustrated, then when they agree with you and they say that they are frustrated, you can then dig into that. Does that make sense? I know it does, right? So that's another thing that you can do, okay? Then we want to naturally transition into the call, okay? What that basically means is that asking someone to hop onto a call with you is not this big event where you need to feel this pressure. It's literally just a continuation of the conversation that you're already having in the DMs, which then leads to a sale, okay? And what a lot of people do is they put this onus on the call being this huge thing where it's like this massive event, and asking for it feels so laborious, right? Where, let me just check my camera's on, hold on. There we go, yeah, it is. So they view the call as this massive thing, and it's so nerve-wracking to ask someone to get onto a call, right? What you need to do is just naturally transition into the call. Once you've found out about their pain, their problems, etc., then you just naturally transition into offering them a call, okay? And then when we've transitioned into that, what we want to do is then take control. Okay, now what I see a lot of people doing is sending booking links out to people, right? Personally, unless you're doing B2B or something like that, where you've got high amounts of traffic and you legitimately don't have many spaces, then I would avoid sending booking links, okay? I'm not going to tell you why, well I am, but I'm not going to go into detail. You lose control, right? Because you give away the choice of booking a call to someone else, right? They can see a schedule, right? They can see when you've got slots. And then you have to rely on them actually being proactive and booking in, instead of just asking them for their details and then proactively booking in on their behalf. And what tends to happen, right, and I can guarantee you this will happen to you at one point or another, is that you send a booking link to someone, right? They haven't booked in. You've had to follow up, you've had to follow up, you've had to follow up, you've had to follow up. Then they ghost you and you've lost the call. You're thinking, what happened? Everything's gone so well. You've sent them the booking link and then they've ghosted. Why have they ghosted? And you have no idea, right? That could have been avoided by you just taking control, right? Mind-blowing stuff, I know, right? Imagine that, imagine taking control of a conversation and booking someone in manually. Crazy, but yeah, I just never get why people send booking links out to people, because you're handing over control of your entire sales process to someone, which is weird. I'm going to give you a second to write that down, okay? Now, the downfalls, right? This is where most people go wrong, okay? If you've ever attended any of my webinars, if you've ever attended any of my live events, if you ever listened to me speak on stage, then you're going to know you're probably not going to fall victim to any of these, because I'd have drilled it into you already. But if you're already doing these things, please save yourself the heartache, save yourself the time, save yourself the pain of doing these things, and just listen to obviously what I'm saying, right? So the biggest downfall that people have when it comes to booking in calls, right? And I've put three, I don't know if you can see that, but I've put 3 crosses, right? Because these are the worst mistakes that you can make. Scripts, right? I've been over scripts time and time again. You do not need a script to book a call, right? You need to actually focus on talking to the person, right? Because I can guarantee you that before you've had your DM script that's been made by you by a mentor. I'm not a business mentor yet again, just stating that. On your screen, right, on one half of the screen, and the other half was the Instagram, messages, right? And you just think, right, how can I get people through this DM script, right? Please bin that off, right? You've got enough content on my channel to formulate a conversation with someone, so please bin that off, right? So that's first. Scripts, absolutely no. Number 2 is coaching in the DMs, right? What I see a lot of people do is give out advice in the DMs to people, right? If you want to get someone onto a sales call, you do not give out advice in the DMs. And I'm absolutely waving my pen like a madman, so I'm going to explain why, right? So if you are coaching in the DMs, you are not solving that person's problem, right? Because their problem is not information, it's action, right? In a B2B context where someone doesn't know how to set a sales call, the problem is information, right? But with fitness coaching, right, it is action and accountability, okay? Now, you giving someone advice will alleviate them of pain because they feel like they've gained something, when in reality they haven't gained anything, because that information is not going to do anything for them because they have no accountability and structure. Okay, so when you give advice in the DMs, you're giving people just enough of value for them to feel like they're out of pain. Okay, and what will tend to happen is if you're trying to get people onto a sales call and you start coaching in the DMs, what's going to happen is that they're going to turn around and say, oh, okay, I think I'm good for now. You can offer them a call because you're like, right, I've given you value, hop onto a call with me. And they can say, oh, I think I'll see how this goes first. I'll give it some more time, blah, 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 blah. And that's because they do not feel like they're in enough pain in order to facilitate a change. Whereas if you completely change from doing this and you switch into actually digging into pain in the DMs instead of coaching it and preventing it, people are going to be in enough pain, which will lead them then to booking on a call with you and becoming a client. Okay? Avoid this at all costs. Okay? It's one of the biggest things that I have seen, right? And I had a client called Martin, right, who before he came to me was coaching people in the DMs and he wasn't booking calls. And then when he did book calls, he wasn't closing them because because the framing of the call wasn't the right frame, right? He joined my sales academy, right? You can go and look at my Instagram to see the result, right? He joined my sales academy and then within the first 2 weeks, booked a call. I think it was a year paid in full or 6 months paid in full. I think it was like 1.7K. Right, which is fantastic, right? And his biggest downfall was that he was coaching in the DMs. Okay, he was giving people free value in the DMs and just enough value to make them feel like they're out of the hole that they're in, which then led to him not booking as many calls. Now he's regularly booking calls and making sales, which is obviously what you're here for, right? Cool. So now that we've gone off that, right, please just do not coach people in the DMs. And if you want my help on it, literally just click the first link down below, book a call, and I will literally show you step by step how we can help you double your sales, double the cash you collect on a call. Okay, nice. Anyway, then it comes down to forcing the call. Now what that basically means is just booking in the sales call for the sake of it, okay? Now I have seen people do this where they've just said just hop on a call, just hop on a call, we'll see how we can help, right? And that's just forcing the call. Right, you do not need to force a sales call and you do not need to disguise a sales call as something else in order to get people onto a call. Right, I've seen people do it before. I had someone literally 2 days ago say to me, oh, let's have a coffee chat and we can see how we can help. I was like, what the fuck is that? A coffee chat? Like, the framing of it is just so wrong, right? So wrong. So do not force the call, right? Do not just disguise the call as something else to get people onto a sales call, right? You need to follow the process and you need to make sure that you're doing, well, these things here in order to get that person onto a qualified book sales call, as opposed to just saying, hey, hop on a call, right? Like, why would you want that? Hey, just get on a call, right? Like, it's stupid, it's silly, right? And this happens because people do not know how to set qualified sales calls, which is why I exist, okay? Then we've got people hiring setters and VAs, right? I've written this in 2 separate points, but I'm just going to make it in one, okay? Unless you are booking 20, well, not 20, but unless you are booking, depending on account size, etc., unless you physically do not have time to book calls, right? Like you physically can't, you're maxed out, you've got so many clients, you're running a team, you don't need a setter and a VA, right? I can guarantee you that you've probably thought of hiring a VA or a setter in the last couple of months. And I can guarantee you that the reason that you've done that is because you've sat there and you think, right, I'm not booking calls, right? I'm only booking 3 or 4 calls a week. I need a setter and I need a VA to book more calls. You don't, okay? And the reason that you don't is because they are supplementary to save you time, not to get you better results, okay? The people that I know that have setters, right? The offers that I close on, the people that I work with who have setters, the reason that they have setters is because they are so busy, right? They do not have the time. They're busy, they're maxed out, they're doing service delivery, etc., etc. They do not physically have the time to hire us to do DMs. And if they don't do the DMs, they're not going to get any sales calls booked, right? And they're booking like 20, 30 sales calls a week, right? Bare minimum. You do not need a setter to take you from booking 2 calls to 4 calls a week, or from 4 calls to 8 calls a week. You need to just get better at sales. It's not that difficult, right? And I see people hire assistants, right? And VAs and all this shit to book them more calls, and ask them, how many calls are you booking a week? And they say 2. And you're paying someone else to do that. It's ridiculous, right? And it all comes from not having the ability to book a qualified sales call, because you think, ah, fuck this, I'm not going to get better at sales, I'm just going to hire someone else to do it. Okay, right? So let's say you hire a setter, right? Cool. They will need to be trained on your specific way of talking and your specific way of doing things. And if you cannot book 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 sales calls a month, how are you going to train them to do the same? Okay, let's talk about a VA, right? A foreign VA, typically from the Philippines, Asian countries, etc. Firstly, they have no idea how to sell, right? So they have no idea how to effectively communicate value to people, right? Or how to create problems. Secondly, they just follow a script, which if the script is shit to start with, it's going to be shit to carry on with, okay? And then thirdly, they are not going to be able to communicate effectively like you, and they're just going to ask questions, and they're just going to follow this and run into the same problems, okay? So if you're not booking, right, like let's say for instance, if you're not booking 10, 30, 40, 50 sales calls a month, you don't need a setter, you just need to not be as shit at sales, right? Obviously I can help with that, like that's not a problem at all. If you want me to help you with it, cool. If you want to watch other videos on my channel to find out a bit more about how you can book qualified sales calls, I'll pop a video right here for you to watch. You should probably do that next. Watch that video and then obviously get booking more sales calls.